As you all know, CalSTRS does not administer a health benefits program. However, the topic of health benefits and health care in retirement is very relevant. Individuals need to be adequately prepared and aware and ready because the costs can be quite extensive, and to be secure in retirement, it's an important topic. And that's why every couple of years, CalSTRS produces this study. I want to acknowledge in the audience we have Ruth Lattendorf, and she was the lead researcher on this project.
Hi.
And I think she's done a great job preparing the materials that are going to be presented to all of you today. So I want to thank her for that. She also has the really deep knowledge about the individual numbers, so if you have questions, she'll be able to contribute, and I think would be happy to do so. This presentation is primarily going to focus on the level of health benefits coverage for CalSTRS members. But before we start into that, I'm going to provide really a very brief amount of information on just a few topics that I think are relevant and that I want to ask you to keep in mind that when we go and start looking at that coverage, to keep these aspects in mind. Oops. And the first aspect that I want you to consider is a really easy, straightforward one, and really all three are pretty straightforward. The first aspect is, as we age, the cost of healthcare becomes more expensive, right? It makes sense. Tom has just told us that we're all going to live longer, and I look to those slides to tell me that I'm going to live longer with good health, and I hope that that's true. Nonetheless, longevity means that we're going to live longer in old age, and we know that in old age, we access health care more frequently, and the services that we access tend to be more expensive. So there's a concept in health care and health care benefits that's called age rating. And it means exactly what I've just explained, that as we age, we use services more often, and those services are more expensive, so the total cost of health care is higher. And age rating means it costs more to provide health care to an older person. The second piece that longevity plays in this puzzle is we're going to live longer and things are going to cost more, and we have a longer time to accumulate those costs. So the total cost incurred is higher. So the second aspect that I want you to keep in mind and consider when we start looking at coverage is that over time, regardless of age, the cost of health care and then the related cost of health care premiums is increasing. And this slide is a very specific slide that we selected to try to make a more general point. I don't know if it's going to work, you can tell me. But what the slide presents is the rate of the premium growth in a health benefit. And what you see is that for the active and pre-Medicare populations, the rate of premium growth is double that of inflation, which is really important. It's an important characteristic because any cost that people will bear in retirement that is growing at that rate is going to play a very significant role in the adequacy of their financial situation in retirement. The blue line that dips below zero reflects the Medicare-aged retirees and the cost of their premium, and the dip is really a reflection of Medicare just after the Affordable Care Act went into place. Medicare started covering some preventive procedures and was keeping expenses of Medicare additional premiums down. And once that went into effect and kind of leveled out, then you see a similar increase in the rate in those premiums as well. The third aspect that I'm going to ask you to keep in mind is the fact that individuals who retire before an age where they're eligible for Medicare, it's an extremely vulnerable population, and this is true for a number of reasons. First, it's because they sit in an in-between area. They are no longer working, and presumably when they were employed, their employer was covering part of the cost of their Medicare, of their medical coverage premium. And they're too young to qualify for Medicare. So if their employer doesn't offer support during this period of time, they're really left to their own resources. And in spite of the fact that they are younger than the age where they would qualify for Medicare, they're still in an age range where they're going to be incurring costs due to the aging process. So the cost of medical coverage at this point in life can be quite expensive.
Lisa, do we have a ballpark figure on how many members fit into that category, the pre-Medicare retirees? In general, like a percentage of our membership?
I'm going to ask, does anyone have that number at the tip of their fingers?
I'd just be curious. Okay. Yeah. I'd just be curious, maybe at our next benefits and services meeting, we could just kind of follow up with that. That's another flag.
It would be easy to pull it for
It'd just be
you.
interesting because I'm sure you'll, just the vulnerability of those members, I think is significant. I'm just kind of curious how many members that would include, so.
We can pull the numbers for you. You'll see in a couple of slides what the coverage, what the support from employers looks like for that group. And it's very positive, especially when you compare it to national trends for employers covering that group of individuals. So just a few national trends, and this information is provided just for frame of reference when we start looking at what CalSTRS members receive. In general, employer support for health benefits in retirement is declining. And in general, those cuts are directed at new employees. Right? Employers don't want to take away things that they've already granted to people who are currently employed. So the focus becomes changing the requirements to qualify for health benefits. And these tend to focus around your particular hire date or the time base that you're working or some years of service minimum. And those changes are put into place and then they affect the people who are newly hired. One new option for folks that seems to possibly be of interest is the concept of health exchanges. And this is an opportunity for individuals to go and almost shop around and look and compare the cost of health benefits, and then hopefully be able to select something that fits within their financial range. So we're going to proceed and look at data that's reflective of our membership. We have split this data out by the K-12 population, and then when we're done looking at this, we'll look at the community college population. The data that's going to be reflected around the K-12 population is based on data that we've obtained from the California Department of Education, and they collect this information on a survey that they conduct on salaries and benefits. The nice thing about having this data set available is they have an incredible response rate. So they have over 90% participation from districts and over 90% representation of current employees. So this slide is really the meatiest, I think, data slide on the health benefit coverage rate of our CalSTRS members. And what you're seeing is the percentages of teachers that monetary support is offered for health benefits. And what the slide generally shows is this trend, the level of coverage that members are receiving has stayed very stable over these 5 years of data. And the level of coverage is high, and especially high relatively to national standards. So over 90% of active employees, actually over 95% of active employees, work for an employer that offers financial support for health benefits. And in that particularly vulnerable group that I mentioned, those individuals who retire before they reach Medicare age, they enjoy, over 80% of them enjoy financial support for health benefits. Now you see a step down for those people who are retiring at Medicare age, and only 30, just maybe 35% on average are receiving financial support at that time. This is not inconsistent with what we see in national trending data, that step as people enter Medicare age, the financial support from the employer tends to decline.
Is it, 'cause I don't know the K through 12 system, is it, I mean, when you hit 65 in K through 12, it probably depends on the district, because you bargain health benefits, right? Does Medicare cover more and then the district's healthcare kind of kick in and cover the rest? Or how does it work for, I guess I'm just trying to understand why this diminishment.
So Medicare covers basic costs for those 65 and over, and I believe it becomes the primary coverage. And then if you want additional coverage, it's supplementary coverage to Medicare.
Even if you're an active teacher? Okay, sorry, I just needed, thank you, that's helpful.
Wait a minute.
Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah,
So if you're still
asking-
teaching and you're 66 years old, is Medicaid your primary health benefit and then you get, does that make sense?
I think it is.
Because it's different than,
I don't know.
okay.
You can receive Social Security benefits, but you can't receive Medicaid, correct? Is that what, that's what it is, right? Yeah.
Medicare.
Medicare.
Yeah, Medicaid's for,
Yeah.
Long.
You typically don't collect, I mean, you would take your employer's benefits, which are gonna be higher
Right,
Right.
exactly.
until.
so people don't apply for Medicare
Right.
until,
Until they
typically
so
retire.
you
don't
could be
apply
like
for it until
70
you
years
retire.
old, not apply for Medicare, because there's no, okay.
Yes.
Sorry,
Right.
I didn't mean to digress into Medicare, that's a whole nother area that I'd like to learn more about, but not in this
Right, you have to
meeting.
be
But I'm just curious. Okay, I guess I'm just trying to figure out the bars, so anyway, thanks, Lisa.
Okay. So what you saw in the prior slide was that the majority of members will have some employer financial support for health benefits in retirement. And that's really, I think about it in terms of hurdles. That's the most important aspect when people are planning financially to have adequate coverage in retirement. There are two additional aspects that are, once you know, is the employer going to contribute financially? There's two additional aspects to consider. And the first one is the cost-sharing ratio. So I don't have a slide for this, but the chart for it is on Benefits and Services, page 42, if you want to look at it there. There is a change in responsibility where the employer starts paying a somewhat smaller percent of the premium, and the employee or the retiree begins paying a somewhat bigger percent. And I think the important thing to note here is that the dollar impact on the payment per month is rather modest. As people retire that are pre-Medicare age, they are going to pay for their premium about $100 more per month, which in healthcare terms is a modest amount. When people retire at Medicare age, if they choose to have additional supplementary coverage to Medicare, their dollar value per month actually goes down compared to what they were paying when they were working. And this is because even though they're paying a somewhat higher percentage of the premium overall steps down because Medicare takes the first line of payment. The second important aspect to consider is how long will the employer financial support last? And this really varies employer to employer. We've rolled up the averages just to provide a picture of what a member's situation might look like. And you see those presented here. 25% of K-12 teachers in retirement will receive financial support for health benefits over their entire lifetime. And an additional 54% will be covered until age 65, which is the current Medicare age. So that results in 79%, at least 79%, having coverage through that critical period that I mentioned. There's an additional, couple small pieces of that pie. 4% will receive monetary support for some number of years into retirement. It's based on years, and how that looks for you depends on your age when you retire. And then 7% will be covered until an age other than 65.
I just wanted I'm just guessing, presuming that some of this data, I wouldn't say skewed, but is influenced by, we typically bargain health benefits, and so there's several large districts in the state, so I would imagine that, I'm guessing, not 25% of the school districts provide lifetime health benefits. 25% of the members, right? They're covered.
25% of members, yes.
Members, right. So I guess I just wanted to mention that because I'm aware of a lot of districts that don't provide, lifetime coverage. So.
Yes, yes. And it seems to be that somewhat the coverage depends on the size of the district.
Right. Well, and it's collective bargaining,
Yes.
right? They bargain.
Okay. So this just summarizes the numbers that you saw on the prior page. 90% of teachers who are currently working will have some level of employer support into retirement, and 79% will have support through age 65. So that concludes the information that I'm presenting on the K-12 population. And before I go on to the community college population, any questions at this point? Okay. So I'm going to proceed into the community college arena. It's a bit more complex. That may be an understatement. The complexity starts with how the data is acquired. While we have the benefit of the Department of Education collecting the information for the K-12 population, we actually survey districts ourselves to collect the information for the community college group. And this is because the information isn't available through other sources. We model our survey after the Department of Education survey, and we collect as similar variables as possible so that the data can be comparable and meaningful in similar ways. That being said, there's 72 community college districts. We heard back from 20 of them, so we had a 28% response rate. And before I show the slide that's going to show you similar to the K-12 population, it will show you the percentage of faculty that are covered, I want to show this slide, which speaks to the workforce, the community college workforce. And what is important to note from this slide is that the majority of the community college workforce is temporary. And temporary is defined as working less than 67%. And the reason this is important is because we can look at the number of teachers who work for an employer that offer employee health benefits, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily qualify for them because there's usually requirements to obtain the coverage. That being said, of the 20 districts that reported, 100% of the faculty working for those districts work for a district that offers health benefits monetary support for active employees. And 79% of those faculty work for an employer that offers monetary support for them if they retire before Medicare age, and 51% work for an employer when they retire at Medicare age. And I showed the other slide first because these numbers you've got to take into consideration the fact that almost 70% of the workforce is temporary, and these employers all have requirements to qualify for the support.
It's based on like right now with the state budget, and when the economy is better, there's less hourly classes available for adjuncts. So like in our contract in LA, and I know a lot of other contracts, you have to work a certain amount as a part-timer to qualify, like you said, for health benefits. So if right now our enrollment is at a low for the last 20 years, at least in our district, then you have a lot more adjuncts that aren't qualifying for healthcare. And so it's kind of almost semester by semester, year by year, which is a very hard way to live your life. So.
We asked on the survey for people to report their latest, when the most recent change in their contract was regarding these benefits. And yes, it had to be looked at year by year. And it's interesting, right? You've got that knowledge of what's happening with people's full-time equivalent, the percentage that people are working. So it's interesting to note that for this group, all have prerequisites in order to receive the health benefit support. And those prerequisites indicate that half require some amount of full-time work. And in order to receive the benefit in retirement, on average, 12 years of service was required. So there's some pretty significant eligibility requirements.
So Alyssa, what were the prerequisites again to be able to qualify for benefits for?
Half of the employers required some amount of full-time work during your career.
Okay.
So to qualify, that 79% of faculty work for an employer that would offer monetary support, but those employers require some portion of your employment with them to have been full-time.
And do you know what the average tenure is of a faculty member who might be temporary? Is there a pathway to become permanent full-time? Or is that a whole separate discussion?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean,
I don't have that data at my fingertips. Do you have?
I mean, I could answer and just say that that's a chronic issue in education in California right now. If you look at the CSUs, UCs, community colleges, you have folks that come to our part-time task force who have taught part-time for 30 years, and if they're in the defined benefit system, it takes them a long time to vest into CalSTRS DB because of that. And a lot of them have not been able to get full-time jobs. So there's different contracts stipulate things like if you've been a part-timer and are on the seniority list, you can get an interview, but there's no guarantee part-timers can ever get a full-time job. It just depends on, you know, the economy, the timing, whether the committee selects you as a full-timer. So
And do we have any insight as to whether the temporary faculty have access to healthcare benefits through another employer? I mean, I think it's probably unlikely, but I don't know if we know that.
I don't have that information either, although my understanding is a lot of individuals who teach as part-time faculty kind of piece their positions together. And so they were not having full-time employment anywhere else. Does that make
That does
sense?
make sense, yeah.
freeway flyers is the colloquialism.
Yeah.
I don't have a data variable for that. All right, let's see. So this slide just demonstrates what we've been discussing, and it indicates that approximately half of the temporary faculty work for an employer who offers support to temporary faculty. So unique situation, right? So it's a percentage of a percentage, and all of the districts have minimum qualifications, and those typically focus on the percentage that somebody is working compared to a full-time equivalent. And on average, the full-time equivalent percentage that's required is 50%. So to qualify for the monetary support as a temporary faculty, you'd have to be working at least at the 50% level. Okay. You heard Tom mention the retirement readiness assessment, and what we're trying to do actually with the program is starting to connect all the pieces of research so that they can form each other and tell a more cohesive story. So we pulled the information relevant to healthcare that just to add a little bit of rounding out to this study. And the last retirement readiness assessment, the data from that said most members in retirement did not report that funding healthcare in retirement was a significant problem. I think it was something like 60-some% rated affording healthcare coverage as only slightly or not at all difficult. There also appeared to be an opportunity to educate our members, and this is the opportunity, kind of the call to action. What can we do with all of this research that's produced? Active members are not always sure what their situation is going to look like in retirement, and they'd need to gain that understanding from their employer. We do, let's see, I'm going to skip to the next slide. We do offer financial awareness training and the importance of understanding what kind of health care coverage you may have in retirement and what those costs might look like for you. Those are all covered in that training. And there is a recommendation just in general to try and encourage teachers and faculty to understand what their coverage might be. And I think that's all I have. Okay.
Thank you. That was, both of the studies were really interesting. And I guess I more have an editorial comment to make on the last study where you really identified the particular cost burden that our members might face who are pre-65, so not Medicare eligible, but that don't have any or significant cost support from their employer. I think in particular with some of the changes that are being contemplated in Washington around the Affordable Care Act. And Elisa, you talked about age rating, and the Affordable Care Act narrowed the age rating so that the impact of aging was not as significant on the cost to individuals as it used to be. you know, some of the proposals out there that have been floated would go back to expanding it again. So if it were to do that, it would be an even greater impact to some of those pre-65 retirees. So just, I'm glad we're talking about it and, you know, hope that we can do more around education.
And I think we should, I think given the current climate, I think whether that's, you know, I know this is a triennial study, but I certainly think it's worth discussing in some form next year from the direction perhaps of Joy and I for the committee because of whatever's going to happen. I think it would be prudent. So perhaps we can do a, you know, kind of a, this is where we're at right now, because there might be implications for our members.
Okay, I think that's fair enough. We've definitely discussed internally tracking some of these things on a regular basis because the changes may be happening more real time. And it also gives us an opportunity to fine tune the study.
Thanks so much. This is, yeah, it's a bit heartening, but I really appreciate it. It's helpful to get more eyes on our membership and just understand where they're coming from to kind of go, okay, how are there things that we, obviously as a board with our policies, what we do with our education to our members to help address some of these concerns. So appreciate it. And Jennifer?
Jennifer Baker, now with the Community College Association, because ironically enough, my other issue that I focus on is community colleges. So thank you for differentiating between K-12 and community college faculty, and it'd be really helpful to also correlate with the information as you're looking at it in the future. The impact that community college faculty have when they start later than their K-12 peers, what impact does that have? Because that means that it also takes them longer to be able to qualify if they're going to get their full-time health benefits. And then you can talk to the chancellor's office. I don't know the number offhand, but there is a certain percentage of part-time faculty that are employed full-time. So there are some part-time faculty that work full-time somewhere and then teach part-time. But it's certainly not necessarily the overwhelming majority, but that certainly does account for some. And then for the part-time faculty, you know, if they're working at 20% at one district, 40% at another, right? 30% at another, and oftentimes they're the ones that have a lot of funds going into DBS because they wind up working 1.2 years, being a freeway flyer. Out of those, are they able to hobble together enough minimal funding for their health benefits? And for many, it's a struggle, but it would be interesting to find out how many of them wind up eating into their other supplemental benefits, because I have heard stories actually when I worked at CalSTRS many years ago, a horrible story of a part-timer who was regularly pulling out their funds in CalSTRS, and they were cashing it out because they were trying to use that to supplement their living and didn't realize that also meant then that they weren't a CalSTRS member. When they went to retire, they found out they didn't have a retirement. And one of the dilemmas for part-time faculty, I'm a little off topic, but it's very important to retirement readiness. Many part-time faculty members don't understand how retirement works, so they're often in Social Security at one district, PARS for another plan for another, and don't necessarily understand the importance of being in one retirement system. But that does have an impact on health, because one district may offer one thing, another may offer another. And if you haven't been able to bargain a good health plan for part-time faculty at one district, but you have at another, they might be able to get a small load. So there are so many factors that really impact part-time faculty, but I would love to be able to have this information because I'd actually love to use it to supplement our arguments for trying to get an increase in the part-time categorical for part-time help with the legislature. So whatever you can do to just break this down for the part-time component would be particularly helpful.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just say the challenge of that is huge. I've been working with part-time issues for as long as I've been teaching, for 12 years, and to Jennifer's point, as many stars in the sky are the types of adjuncts that you meet in terms of their life history, when they started, who they're married to, you know what I mean? There's so many iterations. So I think that's one of the challenges, is breaking down the demographics for that category is just, there's a lot, but I think there are some general categories that maybe I can help and Jennifer could give input on, some general categories, but I think certainly, I know you're not doing this anymore, Tom, but whoever is doing the part-time task force for next fall, I want to talk about health benefits for sure, because I do think that's a huge concern that I have, and I'd love to have a state mobilization for us to all try and bargain, more health benefits for part-time issues, so. Anyway, thank you so much, appreciate it, really interesting, very good food for thought, so appreciate your work, and congratulations on the MBA, Tom, I didn't know you were working on that.